Okay, welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of navigation on the BrailleNote Touch Plus. Now, honestly, this would also apply to the older BrailleNote Touch, the original Touch. So if you have a Touch or a Touch Plus, these are essentially the exact same. Or even if you had an older device than that, a lot of these, not all of them, but most of them will be pretty similar on even older devices like the Apex. So if you are just familiarizing yourself with one of these, maybe you are a teacher or a student or an individual who just purchased one and you've never used one before, and this is brand spanking new, you might want to learn how to get around on it. And so navigation is how we're going to do that. And that's honestly pretty easy. Now we're going to start with the ultra basics and kind of work our way up. And we're going to start with literally just going and scrolling through things. Now, because of Humanware's software that they're running on this called Keysoft, they've essentially made it so that everything on the device acts as if it were a vertical list. Now, I am actually sharing my screen for the purpose of this video too, so you can follow along visually, and there's going to be a green highlighter bar essentially that highlights my cursor position, if you will, or where I'm at on the device, visually anyway. And of course, on my Braille display, I'll have a Braille wherever I am, as well as there will be speech echo back. So anyway, to get around, we have a couple different ways we can go about it. And honestly, in my opinion, it boils down to really personal preference, which one you want to do. I kind of like personally, I like kind of having my fingers on my Braille keys as my like home base, if you will, and moving away from that as little as possible. So sometimes I prefer the ones that use kind of the Braille keyboard shortcuts, but there's some thumb keys and things like that, which I'll talk about. But again, personal preference, all of these are going to let you get around your device. So the first one, and I think probably the most popular one, arguably the most popular way of navigating, is simply to use a spacebar and the backspace button. So if you, again, if you're brand spanking new to this, just for reference, if you were to lay your fingers down on your Braille keyboard, that's the 8 Braille keys and the long spacebar in the middle on the front or top edge of your BrailleNote Touch, the backspace is going to land underneath your left pinky. And just as reference, your right pinky will land on Enter. That will come into play a little bit later. And your thumbs should land about on the space bar. So backspace, again, should be your left pinky, and space bar should be under both of your thumbs, really. And so spacebar would scroll you to the next item in a list. Sometimes I refer to it as scrolling down, but basically it's going to scroll you to the next item on a list. And backspace will scroll you to the previous item on a list. So right now I'm on my main menu. I happen to be on contacts. I can check that on my both my visual display or in Braille, or I can have it repeat with a Braille command, but we'll skip over that one for right now. Anyway, I'm going to press the space bar, which is going to take me from contacts to the next item on my menu, which I know happens to be key mail. So I'm going to press space. Email, Gmail. Okay, and then you probably heard it echo email, key mail. And if I press space again, it'll take me to the next item, which I happen to know is Internet, Chrome. Internet, Chrome. There we go. And now if I want to go backwards through this list on my main menu, I could press the backspace button. So I'm going to press backspace, and you're going to hear it go back to email. Email, Gmail. There we go. And if I press it again, I'm going to go backwards again, which would be to the top of my main menu, which would be contacts where I started. So I'm going to press it one more time. Contacts, key list. There you go. So basically up, down, space to go up and down through a list is the way I think of it. So space to go down through a list or the next item, backspace to go to the previous item. Now you can also do this again, exact same scrolling by a slightly different command. And this would be to press spacebar plus .4, which would land underneath your right pointer finger, or spacebar and .1, which should land underneath your left pointer finger. So spacebar .4 to go down at the same time, that will scroll me down. So I'm gonna press that, spacebar and .4, email, Gmail. And jump me from contacts to email, back again to go back up, spacebar and .1. Contacts, key list. And you're to scroll me back up. So space and .4, space and .1 also scrolls you up and down through lists as well. Now we have yet a third way to scroll up and down through lists item by item, and that's to use the thumb keys on the front. So on all Humanware devices, they have what they call Humanware signature thumb keys. And so you'll find these on the front edge of your device. And depending on your device, there might be a couple extra little buttons in the center. Mine is a BrailleNote Touch Plus, so I do have 3 small buttons in the center, but these are like your home button and a back button, some other things like that, which we'll talk about a little more in depth later on. But we're going to be focusing on mainly the navigation, so getting around from point A to point B at this point. And so we're talking about the thumb keys. So there are technically 4 thumb keys, and these are kind of rectangular buttons. There are 2 that are shorter rectangles and 2 that are longer rectangles. The 2 shorter rectangles are on the far left and far right. The left one is called previous, the right one is called next. So as you can imagine, if you press the right one, that's going to take you to the next item in the list, which for us is going to be email. I'm going to go ahead and press that to illustrate. Email. So I press that furthest right thumb key, that scrolled me to the next item. And if I want to go backwards, so again, back to contacts, my leftmost thumb key, which would be the previous button. Contacts, key list. And there you go, it scrolls me back. So there you go. You have 3 different ways of scrolling, honestly. And again, personal preference. Some of it's where your hands are already. For example, if your fingers are down reading the Braille display, sometimes it's easier to hit the thumb keys. But if you're up in the middle of typing or writing or something like that, then it might be easier to press that space bar or that backspace or the space and dot 4 and space and dot 1. And so it's really personal preference, whatever happens to work for you, but it's basically multiple ways of doing the exact same thing. Okay, so now we know how to get up, down, and around, basically. And again, any of those same 3 commands is going to get you through anything that on this device, really. So it's all up and down, everything on the device, because of this nice Keysoft software has basically been designed to act as if it's just one big long list. Okay, so now if we want to select something, so okay, we can go up, down, but how do we actually select it? Now that's really easy. A couple different ways to do that as well. We can either press enter. So that would, again, for recall, that's going to land when you have your fingers on the Braille keys. That's going to land underneath your right hand pinky. That's going to be your enter. So that will make a selection. But in addition to that, you can also use your cursor router keys to make a selection as well. So your cursor router keys, again, for those who are not familiar, above each one of your Braille cells. Now, if you're not totally sure what a Braille cell is, basically if you found one Braille character, that's one Braille cell. If you go find a Braille character on your Braille display and you go directly above it, you're going to find a little kind of rounded, kind of almost feels like a bigger Braille dot, almost. You're going to find a little rounded button. Those are your cursor router keys, and there's going to be one above each one of your Braille cells or each one of your Braille characters. Now, the BrailleNote Touch I happen to have has a 32 cell Braille display, meaning it's capable of showing up to 32 Braille characters at once. So I also have 32 router keys. They do also offer an 18 cell device as well. So anyway, you can press any one of those cursor router keys above the Braille, and that would make a selection as well. So just to illustrate this, I'm going to go to my email. Gmail. Okay, I'm going to press enter, because that was the first way we can make a selection. And it popped me into my email. Silence that really quick. It popped me into my email. And I so happen to have had an email up previously for joining the Zoom meeting, because that's how I'm actually recording this. That popped me right back into my email where I left off. Okay, so there we go. There's just making a selection that way. Now I'm going to go home real quick. I'll teach you how to go home in just a minute. But I want to show you the second way of making a selection. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to Internet, Chrome. We'll do Internet, which is Google Chrome this time. And again, I'm going to press one of my cursor router keys. Now it can be any of them above your active Braille. So if you go find your Braille characters, reach up any of those round bumps, press it. Voila, boom. Search or type web address. Edit box. There we go. Pops me into Google Chrome, and I'm on the search bar. Awesome. Super easy. There we go. Okay. We can now go up, down, and select different things. Now, those are essentially your basics. There are a couple other commands that are useful, but basically that's how you get up, down, and around, essentially. Now, there's another thing you might want to do, which is to go home or to go back. So the difference being, if anybody's used to, like, say, an iPad or an iPhone, or even Android phones for that matter, on the old iPhones, there used to be a physical home button. On the new ones, you have to do the swipe up from the bottom, right? Your BrailleNote Touch has a home button as well as a Braille keyboard shortcut for home too. So your home button, if again on the front edge, in the middle, in between your thumb keys that we talked about earlier, there is a circle button. Well, there's actually 3 small buttons right in the center. There's a kind of triangle button, there's a circle button in the middle, and then there's a small square button. Those are effectively your Android buttons. If you're not an Android person, you may or may not know this, but Androids usually have, and sometimes they're physical buttons, sometimes they're on-screen buttons, but they have a home button, a circle button, that usually takes them back to your main menu, right? Doesn't matter where you are, if you're in an app or on a web page, doesn't matter. You press the home button, that should take you right back to your main menu. And that does the exact same thing on here. So you press that circle button to go to the main menu. And then that little triangle button, that acts as a back button. So sometimes you just want to go back one step, right? You might be in an app and you went to the next screen. You're like, oh, I just want to go back one screen or back out of this menu or something to that effect. And that's where the little triangle button comes in. That's your back button. Androids have dedicated back buttons on them. And so that will take you back just one step. And then there's also the square button. And this actually is a little bit twofold. The square button, if you press it simply one time, I'm gonna do that. It brings up you into multitasking. So multitasking essentially is all the apps that you have running in your background. This also allows you to switch to other apps that you may have had open. So if you need to like alternate between open programs, you can do that. It also allows me to clear or clear all or clear individual apps that I have running in the background. If one app is maybe acting up and I want to close it, but that's getting off in the weeds right now. We're talking about navigation. So search or type that was a perfect time to illustrate using my little triangle button as my back button because I didn't actually want to be in my multitasker. So I pressed my back button once and it took me right back to my Google Chrome web browser where I was at. Okay. And then all that same little square button, I was telling you, it is twofold. You can also press and hold that button and that will open up your context menu. We will also kind of elaborate on that a little bit later on as well. Now I want to go home. So I'm simply going to click my circle button on the front edge of my device one time. Contacts, key list. And voila, I'm back to my main menu. You heard it say contacts, key list. And I happen to know that is the very top option on my main menu. So I am indeed back to the top of my main menu. All right, now I should mention this while we're on the little circle button, and somebody might accidentally do this, so I'm just going to talk about it real quick. You can also press and hold that home button as well, and that brings up OK Google. OK Google, you can use speech and ask it questions. It's a lot like Siri or Alexa for those who are not familiar with it, and you can say, oh, what's the weather, or what's on my calendar, yada yada, that kind of thing. So I'm going to leave that honestly at that because again, getting off in the weeds, and we're talking about navigation. So I pressed the circle button to take me home. That was really where we're going with this. Now, there is a Braille keyboard shortcut for this as well. So again, if your fingers aren't near the little circle button on the front, you can also press simply Spacebar with all 6 Braille dots. So that would be the dots that land under your pointer, middle, and ring fingers on both your right and left hand side. Both your right hand and your left hand, excuse me, and Spacebar all together at the same time. That also equals a home command. So just to illustrate this, I'm going to press enter on my contacts. No contacts. I have no contacts. That's just fine. I'm going to say, oh, okay, well, there's no contacts. I'm going to go back home, space with all 6 dots. Voila, that's my main menu. Okay, so we got move up and down. We have making selections. We have going home. Now we also talked briefly, because we were right next to the button, we talked about the triangle button to go back one screen or one level or to the previous item, previous thing that you were on. This is different than home because home takes you all the way back to your main menu. The back button, that little triangle button, is just going to take you back one step. There also is a Braille keyboard shortcut for going back one step, and that is space E. You can think of it, I like to think of it as space E or space exit, right? So space bar and the letter E. E happens to be .1 and .5 on your Braille keyboard, and that would also take you back one step. So again, let's go ahead and illustrate that. I'm going to go ahead and open up my email. Let me silence that really quick. It happened to remember again that I was reading that same previous email, and now I say I'm done reading this email. I want to go ahead and get back out of here to my other emails. So I'm going to press spacebar and the letter E. List, John Taylor, and it took me back one step. And just to illustrate, and it's reading me all that, and I don't want to really read that at the moment, so I'm going to go ahead and silence that. By the way, just for fun, this is a really useful command. Pressing backspace and enter at the same time is your be quiet command, we'll say. That will silence your speech. Some people have a slightly different name for that command, but I'll keep it PG for right now. Anyway, that is your be quiet command. That's a useful one. So if you want to stop talking, like if I scroll, John Taylor, message unread, hello. Backspace and enter at the same time. Again, when you have your fingers on your Braille keys, that should land under your left pinky and your right pinky. Those are your backspace and your enter at the same time. Or some people refer to them as your dots 7 and dots 8 if you're accustomed to how e.braille works. Okay, so that is our essentially backspace E, or that little triangle button acts as our back button. Okay, there we go. That is getting around, making selections, backing up, going home. The next thing I want to talk about, which is also a really useful command, honestly, once you understand the basics, this is probably going to be, I think, one of the most used navigational commands. And that is something called first letter navigation. So to help get around things faster. So, for example, I can scroll down and I'm going to press, I'm going to say I wanted to go to the word processor. So to get to the word processor, I'm going to have to scroll down, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 times to get to word processor. Now, not that that's necessarily a big deal, but some things I may want to get to might be further away than that, honestly. Okay, now let's say I want to get to word processor quickly. Well, I know that word processor starts with the letter W, right? So I could have simply, rather than scrolling all the way to word processor by pressing my scroll command, whichever one of those three you prefer, rather than pressing it 3 or 4 times to get to word processor, I could have simply pressed W. And by pressing W, again, this is something that they built into Keysoft, it would have jumped me to the first item that it found in whatever list I'm in. And this works more than just on the main menu. It works inside of apps and things like that too, inside of all kinds of menus, basically everywhere on the device, honestly, even web pages and stuff. Just by pressing W, it jumped me to the first thing that started with the letter W. Now, for me, that was word processor. They keep the main menu kind of simple, honestly, just so there's not too much going on in there. So I think word processor, if I recall correctly, is the only thing that even starts with the letter W. So basically you press W for the main menu and it's going to get you the word processor, boom, right away. Now, there might be a situation where you have more than one item that starts with the letter that you're looking for. So for example, I'm going to scroll down to all apps. And actually, I was going to scroll item by item, but I was realizing I should just illustrate exactly or, do what I've been preaching here. And I can press the letter A for all apps. So I'm going to press A on my keyboard.
All applications.
And you heard it say all applications. And I don't know exactly how far that jumped me. I forget exactly how many items there are in between the word processor and all applications, but I think it was at least 5 or 6. So that saved me 5 or 6 keyboard shortcuts or scrolls to get to the all applications menu. And then I'm gonna press enter to go ahead and open that up.
Braille terminal.
Now, there was the main menu, and then there's also all apps on the main menu. So the main menu has basically, think of that as like your home screen. It's got your apps that you use most frequently, your word processor, your calendar, your web browser, things like that. All apps is a list of every single app that you have installed on your entire machine. So on here, you could definitely have more than one item, or in this case, more than one app that starts with the same letter. So for example, I'm pretty sure that I have a number of things that start with the letter C on my device. So if I press the letter C in Braille, which is dots 1 and dot 4,
calendar,
and it said calendar. Now I happen again to know that there is more than one item that starts with the letter C. So if I want to get to the next item that starts with the letter C, I can press C again.
Camera.
And you're going to say camera, press C again.
Canvas student.
I have a Canvas student app. C again.
Chrome,
right? And so on and so forth. So in the situation that there is more than one item, more than one app, whatever it may be, that starts with a, whatever letter you're looking for, you can jump to it by pressing the first letter. So now in the menu, it doesn't make a ton of sense because my menu is already in alphabetical order. I could have just scrolled as well. But let's just say, for example, inside of an app, for example, Google Docs. Okay, I'm gonna open up my Google Docs app. Now Google Docs, this is the same Google Docs.
This is some text. This is some text. Google Docs.
Hush that up. So now Google Docs is the same Google Docs app that everybody's using. Basically, if you got an iPhone, you got an iPad, you got an Android tablet, you got an Android phone, that you'd be using essentially the same app. And so this app is not necessarily streamlined for Braille keyboard shortcuts, right? Because it's made by Google and they didn't necessarily know it was going to be on a Braille note taker. They made this more of a visual based app. So there could be more than one item on the screen I'm looking for, whether that be a doc that I have written and I'm looking for the name of it. Let's say, for example, I have some on here, a document on here called sample math. Okay. So let's say I don't, but let's just say I had 50 documents on here and I'm trying to find sample math. Well, I could just press the letter S to jump to sample math. Now, there could be other things that started with the letter S, other items on the screen, maybe buttons, maybe other documents. So I might have to press the letter S a couple of times to get me to the one that I wanted, but that's okay. It's still going to be much faster to press S a few times than it would be to scroll through the list of every single thing. So to illustrate this a little bit, I opened up the Google Docs app again. Here we are. It's landed me on my kind of most recent files. But the one thing I want to do is I actually want to create a new document. Now, I've explored this Google Docs app a little bit, and I know that somewhere, I don't know how many times I'd have to scroll to get to it, but I know somewhere on here there is a create button. So rather than scrolling item by item by item by item until I find the create button, I'm simply going to press the letter C. And that didn't work.
Actions for this is some text, but this is a test file for
So I'm going to scroll a little bit.
Actions for sample math, new document menu, but
okay, forgive me. Create button is inside Google Drive on Google Docs. It's a new document button. So to re-illustrate this, forgive me.
New document menu, button, new document menu, but search docs,
okay.
box.
So I jumped back up to the top of the screen just to show this again. So instead of pressing C, because I was way off there, I'm going to press the letter N for new document.
New document menu, button.
There we go. You may have heard it just jumped straight to the new document button, because that actually, in my case right now, happened to be the very first thing that started with the letter N. Now, let's say I wanted to go to my sample math file, right? Now I'm going to try jumping to that faster, again, by pressing the letter S, because I know I have a document on here called sample math. So I'm going to press S.
Search docs, edit box.
Okay, search. I didn't want the search box. I'm going to press S again.
Sign in to Sterling Adaptive Sterling to
Sign in button. That's not what I look at. S again. No.
Sample math docs.
And there it is. So I did have to press S a couple times to get to my sample math document, but it was still way faster than me going item by item by item until we found it. So that's first letter navigation. Now, in some cases, you know, like this Google Docs app, I had to, you know, go and discover that the button was called a new document button, right? I had recalled the Google Drive app, not the Google Docs app. So anyway, sometimes you have to explore initially until you know what is available to you. Once you know what is available to you, then you can just press the first letter that it begins with in order to get to it quicker. Now, again, if there happens to be more than one item that starts with that same letter, you may have to press it a couple times, but it is going to be way faster and way more efficient than scrolling item by item by item. So again, after you've done a little exploring, after you kind of memorize the app a little bit, know what options are available to you, then you can get to them quicker with first letter navigation. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do my home command to get back to my main menu, which again, if you recall, is space with all 6 Braille dots. We're going to do that.
Contacts, key list.
And voila, it's back to contacts key list, which I know is the top of my main menu. Okay, so now honestly, those are your basics. You can really get around and explore your entire machine pretty darn efficiently, actually, now with those couple of commands. Now, that's really it. You can get around everything now. Those are your basics of navigation. It can get a little more complicated than that. You can get a little more into the weeds. We can talk about getting into menus and stuff like that. But those are how you get around the different ways you can do it and how to do it. So hopefully you find this video useful. Thanks for joining and have a great rest of your day.